Welcome to this episode of the PA system. This year, I'm focusing even more closely on the principle of what we call freedom, what it means to us as individuals and as a collective, and how we not only preserve it, but help create it. I want to let you know up front, this is going to be a more sensitive show and a departure from what I usually do. However, I feel this topic demands our attention because it has become so prevalent and our children are in danger. So in this episode, I'm talking with Craig Sawyer of Veterans for Child Abuse. That's for child rescue. And we're talking about an issue that is long overdue for some real attention. So welcome to the show, Craig.
Thank you, Pam. It's a privilege to be on with you.
Such a pleasure to have you here. So I know that you're a veteran yourself. Tell us a little bit about you and what led you to the work that you're doing.
Yeah, well, I grew up in Southern Texas and was attracted to going into the military and defending our nation specifically from terrorists who would come here and ruin our freedom and our liberty and the life that I'd grown up enjoying. And so I went to the Marine Corps, and then I went to the SEAL teams to do that, and ended up at the highest level of counter-terrorist operations. And then when we started having babies, I went into federal law enforcement, again, still in the counter-terrorist realm, to protect our aircraft from terrorists. And then I did 10 years of high threat mobile security for the Department of State and for our intelligence community overseas in the war zones. And then mixed with that, I did about a decade of film and television work. And one of those projects in film and television was an Animal Planet special called Battleground Rhino Wars. It was counter poaching in South Africa, saving some of the last of the endangered rhinos from poaching. And I learned from the producer of that you can utilize the power of media to really expose a problem and have a much greater impact culturally than you could just kinetically on the ground addressing it in person. So I remembered that whenever a friend of mine from the CIA let me know about child trafficking in the area just north of Houston that we'd grown up, that had become so infested with child trafficking, is so pervasive there, that it was the number one, basically the epicenter of child trafficking inside the continental United States. And our culture was so counter to that there, down home America, Team USA kind of culture. And we're very much against anything happening to children. And that's when I realized, this is a domestic covert operation. It is massive. And since it is generating from 38 to 50 billion dollars a year inside the United States, that makes it bigger than all pro sports combined in annual revenue. And that's when I realized I was done deploying anywhere else around the world to defend our country. The attack was already happening here at home, so it wouldn't do to travel anywhere else to stop the threat that's already here. And so I ended up having to found a nonprofit organization, Veterans for Child Rescue, to rally the funds to film the documentary Contraland, which I spent 3 years filming specifically to empower the American populace with the knowledge of what's going on here in child trafficking, that the populace, the general populace, just would not believe, Pam, if you walked out in the street and told them the stats and the data, and you explained to them, they wouldn't believe it. So I filmed Contraland to show them we could put an ad out and how many predators would come running, and of all different walks of life, and how quickly. And it turns your stomach, but it's empowering to know. Just like if I were sick with a fatal illness and you were my doctor, I would need for you to tell me. It may not be pleasant news, but it would be life-saving news. And I feel like that's what I'm having to do with Vets for Child Rescue. And Contraland is, it'll alert the American populace in good faith, hey, we got a problem, but the good news is we have a solution. We can do something about it. We can be heroes. Everybody can have a part in the solution. Everybody literally can become a champion for children by taking a couple simple steps, and it doesn't have to destroy your life to do it. And we'll talk about some of that, and we'll direct people to our website, vets4childrescue.org, where they can become empowered and see the tools of how to defend their children, how to hound their elected officials, and all of this. But the good news at the end of the day is, yeah, while there's a problem, the good news is that we can each be very instrumental in helping heal it and change it. So I celebrate that.
I think that's so important because most of us, I feel like, come from and live in areas where this is not something that we think is happening in our communities. And certainly a community wouldn't in any way support it if they knew it was happening. And yet it's happening in every community, and a lot of us are unaware of it. And so to your point, the numbers are kind of shocking. I mean, I watched Contraland. It wasn't easy to watch, but I felt like it was important. And, in reference to what you're saying, the number of individuals that would contact you on an ad you would place actually just was extraordinary to me. And so, talk to us a little bit about, are there some things that we can do to have more awareness? Are there signs to look for? Are there ways for us to be more proactive in our communities to help prevent this as well?
Absolutely. There's a lot that can and needs to be done. One of the things is look into your children's devices, your smart devices, their phones, their games, their laptops, because predators utilize the apps and the games to access your children.
Yeah.
So if your child does not know that predators do this, that your child may assume that they are talking to another child because the predator's posing as a child.
Sure.
And your child may be getting themselves identified through facial recognition, through the software, hostile software, and some of these apps. I tell you what, President Trump wanted to ban TikTok from the United States. They should have let him.
Yeah.
Because it's very problematic. And it's a hostile, and it's owned by the Chinese.
I'm glad you mentioned that too, because I was going to ask you about that. So
yeah, and it's obviously far from the only one, but I mean, those apps have no business on our child's phones, but yet it's prevalent because it's covered up and it's forced upon us, and anybody that tries to stop it is steamrolled and attacked. These are crazy times. So not only can it recognize some of these apps recognize your child's face, but also attach it to an area. It can geolocate your child. If wherever your child is, there'll be a dot pinging on the map, so the predator can track whether your child's on the school bus, coming home from school, or walking through the neighborhood, or taking the trash out and grab your child potentially, or on the playground or at the park.
And I don't think most people are really aware of that. I mean, they have those 12-page notices that you're supposed to read before, you download an app. And most of us are like, I don't have all day to sit here and read that notice. But somewhere in there, it says we can locate this phone.
Yeah. So, not only if you're not home, not only can the predator find which neighborhood, but which house, and even in a lot of cases now see which room of the house your child is in. So it's just not something that's healthy. And if they can lure your child outside and say, hey, I've got some some games to trade you, or some candy, or whatever the child's into at that age.
Sure.
They can offer your child whatever they can figure out that your child is into. Your child comes to meet them somewhere, whoosh, your child could end up in the back of a creepy rape van, never to be seen or heard from again. I don't want that to happen. So we have to know. And so that's a biggie. Get into your child's contact list. Who are they communicating with? Who are they spending time with? We have to be willing to invade their privacy to the degree that they're going to live, that they're going to be safe, right? We all want to be, at least we did, we want to be our child's friends,
Right.
Well, you can be their friend their whole life. You only have really about 18 years to be their parent and teach them and mentor them and cause them to be safe enough to start life as an adult. So that's something everybody needs to know. And we can write our elected officials and put pressure on them for stronger enforcement against these child predators. Because quite frankly, a lot of them that are not getting arrested, they're repeat offenders and they do it their entire lives and they rape hundreds and never get caught, or they get caught and right back out.
Yeah.
Or they release them early and the same dynamic exists. So we need that. We need stronger protections for the children. Children needs to be educated and empowered on how not to become victims and how not to be groomed as a good little victim, an easy victim for an adult predator, a full-grown predatory adult, instead of being taught every manner of perversion at a younger and younger age, as has grown to be the case now. So we've got to reverse this trend of trying to normalize child rape, because it's evil and it's destructive and it shatters their little minds. The trauma from children being groomed and sexually assaulted at a young age is incalculable. So many of them commit suicide. So many of them die from drug overdose and physical abuse and neglect. And the ones that do survive have a lifetime of psychological and emotional trauma to try to heal from.
Right.
And it's heartbreaking.
Help us as parents to try to understand, what does this look like? I mean, how do we know, what are the signs we're looking for in our kids? Maybe, because we know that these people are coaches. They're everywhere. They're in, the highest ranks of society. And they're people that we've trusted, our kids with, oftentimes that we least suspected. So what are the signs that we look for in our kids, to know something's not right, something's off here, something's going on?
Yeah, well, I'm a big advocate of trust but verify. I don't think anymore that one adult needs to have access to your children unsupervised. I'm a big believer in nanny cams and anything else. So coaches, teachers, everybody, scout leaders, they need to be scrutinized, and there needs to be oversight there. The children are worthy, right? So we've learned that.
Absolutely.
And but if you see your child begin to withdraw, like our son had that happen, it wasn't a sexual abuse, but it was a psychological abusive teacher that, although the teacher was a pervert, he didn't make any sexual advances on our boy. But what he was doing was, each year this predator would take one child who didn't have a heavy father presence, and I was deploying overseas. I was doing the high threat mobile security, and so I was gone a lot. And so this predator perceived that my son tragically didn't have a heavy father presence, and that tears me up, as you might imagine, to know now. But he would choose one child each year and just separate that child and just start to break them down mentally, and to try to break their confidence,
right,
and just abuse them and try to undermine their happiness and their security.
Yeah.
And I don't know what. Well, no, of course we forced that teacher out of his profession, and we would not let it go because of that. And that's another thing as citizens too. Don't, if we would have just rescued our child and let that predator continue, well, that's no bueno for everybody else. So we had to force the issue. And my wife and I have figured out, when you run across a predator that's just stomping on people their whole career, and they're abusing their authority or power, we really have the duty to step up and put a stop to it, and not just save ourselves and mind our own business. My wife Tressa, she's grown to really resent that term and that ideology of mind your own business, because that's how so many of these victims are falling prey. Is everybody, we see it, but we don't feel like we should be our brother's keeper and say, hey, get your hands off of that child, or stop slapping that little girl all the way down to the ground. What are you doing?
Right.
But it is our responsibility and our civic duty.
Absolutely.
And we can do it nicely, but we need to intervene. If we see children that don't look like they're with their own parents, we can step up and ask some prudent questions. We can explore that a little bit. We can, my puppies.
Yeah.
Let me let him out real quick.
Oh, you're fine.
Some of these young people that are being trafficked, they'll have multiple phones, expensive ones sometimes, because it's a business for them.
Yeah,
So
right.
some of them they've learned to run their own business. They pimp themselves out
Wow.
because they're so conditioned to it.
Yeah.
That they really have kind of a Stockholm Syndrome. And even when law enforcement rescue them from their pimp, they think their pimp is their boyfriend.
Yeah.
Because they have this Romeo pimp syndrome that a lot of the predators will pretend to be the boyfriend,
Right.
until the point, whether it be weeks or months or years later, at some point, the Romeo pimp always becomes the gorilla pimp. And
Right.
then it's abuse, then it's force. You're gonna do this thing or this is going to happen to you. So then the blinders come off, but still the psychological imprinting, the damage is there, and the perception of it's very unhealthy. So
it's warfare. I mean, I want people to understand. I mean, this is really warfare against children. I mean, it's really that level of violence and aggression, and these people are targeting children, right? And they're also, I mean, I also think it's important for people to be aware they're targeting adults that they think are vulnerable and will give them access to children as well. So that's something else that we need to be really mindful of. And I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. And there are traffickers who use dating sites, for instance, to find women who have children. And so that way they can more easily target the children by grooming the mothers.
Yeah. Yeah. There's a wide range of abuse upon the children. Some of it is just callousness, sociopaths who it's selfish and they want their own sexual gratification. And for whatever reason, they can't do that with an adult. Pick your reasons. Right. And they get all the way down to children. And so they're willing to abuse a child, and they don't have the mechanism that causes them to empathize and realize that that's a horrible thing.
Right.
And then you've got the complete psychopaths who subscribe to a religious cult worshiping ancient biblical gods that they feel would have them deliberately defile God's most precious and innocent and poison their little minds and ruin their trajectory, God's plan for that little life. And they feel like they get points from the dark side, so to speak, right, for wrecking one of God's precious and innocent children. So for them, it's all about the abuse and the torture and the murder and the sacrifice of these children. Very, very dark and sick stuff. And all of it is bad for the children, regardless of the motive.
Right.
Any of this abuse is bad for the children. So my thing is simple. Even as a species, leave everything else out of it. If we're going to survive as a species, we have to take care of our offspring. Right. If people want to complicate everything and divide us between every possible manner, I say, let's just boil it all the way down to this is our offspring. Let's take care of them.
Right.
Even animals know that.
Right.
And
right.
If you don't know that, you
so
try
basic.
to reach into
so fundamental.
A cave or a little den and grab a little baby bear from a mama bear and right. find out what happens, right? So yeah. We need to be more like that and less of whatever it's become now, because I'm sickened at my stomach to see what people are inclined to do when they have enough money or access.
Right.
And they can just get off on this psychological goat trail of doing something really, really weird and never come back. And now society's got so separated and there's so much privacy and it's mind your own business. And every manner of depravity is just growing and festering into just some really bizarre stuff. So,
well, and I think too, where we're getting,
fix it.
There's so much being thrown at us all the time in the news, and it's us being pitted against each other over one thing or another. And all the while, our kids are being stolen from us right under our noses because we don't even realize it's going on. And I think that to me is really, really an important thing for people to understand, that all these other distractions are not accidental. There's a lot going on right now. I mean, just the fact that our kids have had to deal with so much over the last couple of years, there's been a lot of trauma in our kids' lives, right? For us to have an awareness around that and to understand what that really actually does to them is really important, because then we can be proactive. We can start to have the conversations we need to have and talk to them about how it's impacting them. Then we can help them deal with those things and better prepare them for people like this that may come along and actually take advantage of any kind of trauma they may have experienced from these things.
Agreed. That's a very astute observation. We do need to have those conversations with them. And I think we need to consider how much of current events we share with the children. Obviously, they're going to pick up on it on the internet and other things. But I mean,
sure.
You make a great point. It's very concerning. It's I would say, in a way, terrifying for a child to not know whether or not their country's about to go to war, or whether or not there's legitimate leadership, or whether, you know, things are just going haywire. And right now we've got some crazy stuff happening in our country that doesn't make any sense on a rational, sane, educated level. A lot of conflict, a lot of contradiction. And so, yeah, that would have to be tremendously upsetting for children. So,
and they've had to deal with a lot of fear.
I'm an optimist and an idealist. I would like it if children could just have a happy and safe childhood where they're loved. I think they all deserve to be loved and know that they matter, and feel that grounded security that I benefited from. I was so blessed. And as I grew up, and I learned that was not only was it not standard, but it was rare. I found that very tragic, and I wanted that for everybody. I can't provide that for everybody, but I can run around now sounding the alarm and saying, here's the biggest threat to children that I've ever seen or heard of. And all my contacts at the highest level of the intelligence community, federal law enforcement community, and others that I know, healthcare, even film and television, they're all aware of the same things, and they're verifying from their own personal experiences and decades in their industries, confirming exactly what I'm finding out, is that, this is orchestrated, and it's bad, and it's hostile. And the people need to wake up and quit falling victim to the game that's being perpetrated upon us, and start to push back. And once upon a time, I heard there was
it's like, if we don't stand up for our kids, what are we going to stand up for? You know, that's what kind of boggles my mind. It's like, once we have an awareness, it's like, we can't just not act like it's not happening. You know, we have responsibility, because if we don't do anything, then we're just as guilty for allowing it to happen. I mean, if we're not doing the best that we know to do in some way.
Yeah. Evil prevails when good men and women do nothing. And what you don't change, you choose.
Absolutely. Yeah.
We're finding out through trial and error that a lot of people don't want to know, because they'll feel the responsibility to do something to help, and they don't want to.
And people that know me, they know that I'm a pretty positive person, and I like to put good news out in the world. And I love to encourage people. I love to share positive messages, but I also feel like we have these precious little beings, that are either our own children, or, family members' children, or maybe they're even our neighbors. It doesn't matter. They're innocent, and they deserve, like you were saying earlier, to grow up and know what it means to be loved and cared for in the world. And it's our responsibility as adults to make that happen. And so if we have to come together, as people in churches, in communities, neighborhoods, we're Americans, we're strappy, we've done some things in the past and we've come together when we needed to. And this to me is no different than all those other times when we've had a common enemy and we need to come together. And so talk to us a little bit about how you're helping people to come together, what you're doing with your organization, and how people can get involved.
Yeah, man. Well, we've got a coalition of organizations, each address a different aspect of the problem than we do. So we at Vets for Child Rescue focus on exposure of the problem, the awareness piece, if you will, and kinetic action directly against it, taking the child predators off the streets and convicting them and putting them in prisons where they can rape no more with law enforcement. So we've got others that specialize in prevention and education. So knowledge is power. That's a huge thing. I'd rather save a child from harm than have to rescue them back out of it.
Right.
It's better for the child, right? We've got one that trains the NGOs, the undercover volunteers that go into the bars and brothels around the world and rescue the girls and boys that don't want to be there in the sex industry. And train their surviving victims afterward on personal security. And we've got one that removes the branding off the girls' bodies, necks, and lower backs, and everywhere else, and add tattoos and the physical burn brands. And we've got another one that provides healing through equine therapy. And so they're all good people. They all are Christians. They're all very effective what they do. And you can find them on our website. Please go there and, shine some love on them as well. And we appreciate them. So that's one of the things we've done. And I've always said, look, the bad guys are coordinated. Shame on us if we don't coordinate our efforts, right? Teamwork is a multiplication factor that we must not overlook. And we've got to make use of that if we're serious about winning. So we're doing that. We're shining a positive light on our law enforcement allies that are running the operations with us and taking children and putting them into a safe situation and taking the predators and putting them in prison where they can rape no more. That's a direct, active change in a dynamic. Every child predator that we put away represents an average of 70 children who will no longer be raped by that predator, because some of them rape hundreds throughout their lifetime, never get caught. Some of them get caught the first time. So the average number of children that a child rapist harms throughout their lifetime is 70. They tend to never stop. So we celebrate our law enforcement allies as shining heroes and exemplars of what we should aspire to, and whether or not you have that level of service and protection in your county or your district. Because let's face it, there is a globalist billionaire who spends a lot of money funding the campaigns of corrupt attorneys general, judges, and district attorneys, specifically so that they will not prosecute child rape or child predator crimes.
Wow.
And they're in major cities now. And I would say, to my knowledge, about every major city has one of these attorneys and DAs who have been funded by that nefarious entity. And if you look at their child rape prosecution rate, it's atrocious. It's unacceptable. So we've got to vote those types out of there. You can look at their financials and see who donates to them and see what their conviction rate is on child predators. And so when we work with the ones that are doing a good job, we shine light on them and celebrate them genuinely because they deserve it. And the children are worthy of our protection. And I'm hoping that by celebrating those that are doing so good, that, maybe another DA's wife will go, hey, hubby, look what they're crushing child trafficking crimes in that county. How about you?
Yeah.
Or hey, sheriff, hey,
Where are we on
chief
that?
of police, where are we in our county? Where are we in our
Yeah.
district? And the voters too.
Right.
If
Right.
you're not getting that, vote them
Absolutely.
out and put someone in who will.
Right.
Get serious about it. Get active, get coordinated, get loud, do it in a righteous and respectful way, but make your will known. That's what the other side's doing. The other side's fighting for every single scrap, every single penny and inch. And we've just been kind of sitting back going, oh, we're just busy. We don't have to, the truth will win out and we're just busy with our lives. Well, no, things are getting so crazy because the lunatics are taking over everything. And we have to literally just learn to assert ourselves as voters and citizens and apply that pressure. Once upon a time, I heard there was a set of truckers that pushed back a little bit in a
Yeah.
neighboring country.
Well,
And people sit up and take notice when you have a group of truckers
yes.
that outweigh the numbers of your own military. That's not just a little fringe group. That's not a cult.
Right.
That's your citizens saying, we don't like what you're doing and we're not going to tolerate it. And we're going to throw the brakes on this and you can't ignore us anymore. That's power. So we have that as citizens. We just have to learn how to apply it. Our founding fathers applied it. They started throwing tea into the harbor and say, no mas, no more of this, right? Get your boot off of our necks. We're going to run our own country. And so once we realize that there is such a thing as righteous indignation, and even the good Lord Jesus Christ was capable of flipping over money changers' tables in the temple when it was an abomination, then we realize that there's a place for that. And there's a right way to do it. And let's set about coordinating and making sure that we fight back and push back for the precious little innocent children who are worthy of all of our protection and defense.
Well, and I think that is such an important point because, not only are, the people behind this staying organized, they're getting more and more organized. They're getting more efficient the less we do, right? Because to them, it's not like, oh, well, if they're not doing anything, let's ease up. No, they're looking for every opportunity. And so if we're not on our game, then we can guarantee that they're having more and more success. So I'm really glad you bring that point up.
Yeah, look, coming from the counterterrorist realm, I can tell you from dealing with terrorists, the same thing as I dealt with at the bus stop in elementary school. Bullies, whether it be at the bus stop or terrorists or child trafficking rings, and this globalist cabal that's abusing authority and privilege on every front. They all share the same culture in that they don't respect anything but force. Only force will stop them. And so we have to grow into the society that will utilize force in a righteous manner to stop the evil that is taking over and abusing all of the innocent and causing so much harm and injustice. It's no good to sit down and be heartbroken over it and just wish. We have the power to do something. And if you really love children, and if you really love peace, and if you really love freedom and liberty, you'll find it within yourself to take a little action and start to collectively push back. And the sunshine can come back out again, a little brighter. And that's when we can enjoy the positive life that we're wired to create.
Exactly.
It's great to be positive, but let's keep it real. If you've got a real problem, again, back to the fatal disease. If I've got a fatal disease and you tell me I have to take action, I have to face it, it's not enough to just wish it away and be positive and go, okay, I would like for it not to be there. I don't want to think about it. It's still going to kill me. I got to take action.
That's right.
And this is no different. So that's the good news is we have the power. DEPOA, my friends from South Africa.
Yes, exactly.
We have the pride in DEPOA.
and there's and there's a cumulative effect to that, especially the more of us that do it and the longer we do it and the better we get at it, right? It's
True.
All of those elements together make a difference. And for us to understand that we as individuals have a lot of power. We have a lot more power than we think we do most of the time. And that's why in many ways, people have for centuries been kept where they are in society, because there's an awareness of how much power people have when they come together. Just like you were saying, when a bunch of truckers come together, things seem to happen, right? It's no different with us. We can do the same things. And I think there's a lot of parents out there that really want their kids to grow up in a world where they don't have to be afraid. They don't have to be wondering, could somebody grab me at the grocery store? Could somebody, find me through my phone? And or could it just happen without the kids even knowing? So just to have that in the back of our minds, that we are capable of doing a lot if we make up our minds to do it.
I want to back you up on that 100%. Look at what terrorizes, quote unquote, the tyrants that are abusing their authority right now. What do the people that everybody see are so corrupt in DC now? What are they crying about? What are they saying they're terrified over? They're terrified over mothers, concerned parents at school board meetings saying, you're not going to teach my children to be easy victims of child rape.
Right.
You're not going to pervert and defile my children. We don't like this curriculum, and we're challenging you to come out from behind the curtain and answer for this. Terror, like terror.
Yeah.
That's not a domestic terrorist. That's a concerned parent. That's a righteous way of asserting yourself. And that's what we have always been supposed to do. But because we haven't for so long, the tyrants and the abusers and the predators have grown accustomed, like you said, to soft and easy targets. And now that when we begin to stand up again for ourselves, they're panicking, but that speaks to the power. There's power there. Look at little 5 foot tall Dr. Judith Reisman in our film Contraland. She stood up and she called out science fraud Alfred Kinsey, who was considered the father of the sexual revolution in the US. The Kinsey Institute is still the recipient of multi-million-dollar grants and donations, and they are putting out absolute fraud, and it's catastrophically harmful for the children. They're trying to normalize child rape. Look at my little daughter, again, another little petite woman, because it's not all about brawn and kinetic energy. It's about moral courage to stand up and speak as a citizen. Our daughter fought back and she helped put her predator away. He's 68 years in prison because she's had the moral courage to stand up and say, you're never going to be allowed to do this again. And I'm going to utilize my power and in the system to put you away. And she helped run operations with us as a junior decoy agent and served very powerfully and helped put 9 child predators away there.
Incredible.
So she had just turned 18 years old. So, I mean, folks, you don't have to say, well, I'm not a big, strong Navy SEAL, or I don't have billions of dollars or this or that. You don't need that. This is what's happening to the children. Ultimately, the inclination to harm a child comes from an evil source. Whatever your religious beliefs are, or spirituality, or whatever you think, that inclination originates from some negative source.
Right.
And your inclination to do good comes from somewhere. Now, I believe the good comes from Jesus Christ and the evil comes from Satan, period. I've seen too much. I know too much. But even if you haven't come to that place yet, just realize that this is a clash between two forces, and the children are stuck in the middle, and they're worthy of our protection. And us standing up and asserting ourselves is very, very powerful in combating that. And that's what we have the opportunity to do. If you wake up and you want opportunity, here it is. If you've ever wanted to be a hero and you've never gotten to be, here it is. It's right there for you, right there.
Say opportunity knocks, and opportunity is knocking very, very loudly. So tell us again where we can find you, how people can connect with you and these agencies that you're working with.
Yeah, man. Okay, you can find us on vetsforchildrescue.org. That's our website. And you can watch our documentary film, very powerful and empowering for you, the viewer, free of charge at contralandmovie.com. Please go there. Not only watch it and be empowered, but share it with everybody. You know, we're talking about any law enforcement officials, elected officials, and everybody, your church leaders, your pastors. Ask them to watch it and pray about it and consider airing it to their congregation, as our church did last week. Very, very beautiful event. So God bless those that have the moral courage to stand up and speak the truth in a time of universal deceit. And we work with quite a few different federal and local law enforcement agencies across the country. We celebrate all of them. We've got a number in-house full-time that work in different capacities, law investigations, and intelligence analysts, but most of the ones we work with are in a joint operation capacity, active duty law enforcement agencies. So we're grateful to be able to do it. And we look forward to a lot more. We're in a busy planning and growth phase right now. And it's an exciting time to see what all can happen, and just the map kind of populating with all the different locations that we've got coordination and planning going on right now. So it's an exciting time.
Well, thank you again so much for being on the show and for sharing all of this information with us. I know that there's a lot more really for all of us to learn, but I think that this is a really excellent jumping off point. You know, for those of us who aren't as familiar, this is definitely some useful information. And for those even who have been around, you know, this topic for a little while, I think it's a great reminder that we can all have these conversations and have these conversations with our kids, with our families, you know, keep the conversation going so it stays in your awareness and you're doing the things that you can do as they present themselves. So important.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much again. And thank you all for watching, and we will see you here again next time. Good night, everyone.